Episode 53 was with Mackenzie Nicole.
Her sophomore album is out called Mystic, and it is a moody-pop odyssey of mental illness, health, and recovery. And for every song in the album, she has a music video, and she'll be launching her short film this May.
And make sure to check us out on YouTube and Facebook at Bringing It Backwards, and on Instagram and Twitter at Bringing Back Pod.
Follow us, please.
And we're Bringing It Backwards with Mackenzie Nicole.
All right. Hi, guys.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are y'all?
Doing well. Thanks for doing this with us. We appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you guys for having me. I love any opportunity like this. I like to meet new people. So this is cool.
Awesome. We'll start at the beginning if that works for you.
I mean, it seems like a good place to start, yeah.
Right on. So you were born and raised in Kansas City?
Yes, Kansas City, Missouri.
Want to tell us about that?
I do want to tell you about that. It's really cool, actually, being raised in Kansas City, especially being raised in the music industry in Kansas City, because it's written off so much. Because a lot of people hear Kansas and they think flyover or
Sure.
they think cows. And it's actually like a really cool area. It's a really great city, super diverse, amazing music and art scene. So I feel really, fortunate to have grown up here. Obviously, great barbecue and a lot of water fountains. So, I love Kansas City. I was born and raised here. I still remain here. I lived in California for a few years when I was little, but
Okay.
yeah, KC. And it's really cool to be in, like I said, the music industry in Kansas City specifically because, or I should say entertainment in general, because there are a lot of, hidden giants here who kind of come here to get things done without the, super slow-paced, overwhelming population of Los Angeles or super fast-paced, overwhelming population of a New York. So
Sure.
I know I could talk up Kansas City forever, especially, the opportunities we get here. So yeah, anyway, I'll stop talking now.
No, that's awesome. I love that. That's really cool. I wouldn't think of a booming music entertainment scene when I think of Kansas City. So that's cool.
Yeah, no one does. But yeah, really, I'm really fortunate. And if you ever visit, there are a lot of cool opportunities just to kind of glimpse it. Like you're talking about like conventional art. We have amazing art museums everywhere. We have a thing called First Fridays in our Crossroads Arts District, where the first Friday of every month, a ton of local artists, musicians, a lot of stuff come and flood the streets of this particular spot in the city and set up booths and have little shows and have get-togethers. It's really cool. We have a group called the Kansas City Creatives, which is a bunch of young, as you might assume, creatives, photographers, artists, musicians who all get together, have meetups. Yeah, it's a really, really vibrant scene out here.
That is really, really cool. Yeah, like I said, I would never have known that. When did you get into music originally?
So a couple things just from the gut, proved that I would be in music no matter what. I was humming before I could talk. So as soon as I could say words, I was singing. It was always a thing for me.
That's cool.
And I always just kind of had a natural inclination towards music. And you could probably credit that at least partially to the fact that I grew up in a very musical household because my parents own the record label Strange Music, which is this is where I get to throw in my little brag fact here. It's the #1 independent record hip hop label in the world, which is like a crazy statistic considering the company started in my childhood home's basement.
That's
so
crazy.
That's always right. So that's always been a thing, obviously. And though the company was formally established in 2000, it really started manifesting in 1999, the year I was born.
Okay.
So that's kind of grown up next to me as a twin entity because of my interest in music and the fact that when my mom was pregnant with me, I would start kicking and dancing in her stomach every time they turned on the radio. It was ridiculous. I was always just going to be a musician. They put me in voice lessons at age 6, and I was classically trained to sing opera from that age to present. So for 14 years now.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was super unlike my teacher to take me on as a client because she said, I will not train her for at least a couple more years when her voice is more developed. And my mom begged her. She's like, please just listen to her. She loves music and she's not bad at music. So just give her a couple minutes and like give her something to sing. And then a few minutes, like in the room with me for like 10 minutes. And my teacher was like, okay, like, I think I could do something with this. So it's a super crazy privilege to even be working with her. It's really, I've had a number of wonderful, fortunate events lead to me doing music. And I think that if it weren't one, it would be another. So really I was meant to be here.
That's amazing. Yeah. So wait, so I want to go back to your dad starting the label. So you were just born, and so you were born, and then he, you know, that's all you've known, right? Is just him running a label.
Yeah, my parents both running the label. Pretty much my parents owned a furniture repair company before that, and had a number of other things they've done before Strange Music. But my dad met his business partner and my label mate Tech9. I think, you know, around the time I was born, and you can find that entire saga and story someplace else. I'm sure I won't bore you with that right now, but
no, it's interesting. Yeah, that's really cool.
Super. It's a crazy story, and I highly recommend if you're interested looking at one of the many interviews they've done about it, because they can tell it far better than I can, and it's super crazy interesting. But then, yeah, my entire childhood was all these rappers like coming in and out of my like white suburbia basement, and like my mom selling merch at these like gritty shows, and like stuff like us driving box trucks around the country on these like, you know, tours we like threw together by ourselves. Like it's wow. I say by themselves. Like it's insane.
You were going on the road with them when they were touring?
Yeah. So oftentimes my dad was gone a lot in my childhood, because he would be gone for like months on end on tours, things like that. But when he had the opportunity to bring us along, my dad is a family guy. So he always tried to. And the cool thing about my position growing up was that I was never left with a sitter, as I always say. I went on the road, and I was allowed to sit in the back of the conference room during meetings or listen on the other side of the phone during calls. And my dad always did this thing where at the end of a meeting or at the end of a phone call, he'd turn to you. It didn't matter if you were 4, if you were 10, what age you were. And he would say, now, what would you do? Or what did you learn? And you knew if you didn't answer correctly, you weren't going to be sitting in on the next meeting. So you had to listen.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of how I was raised. So not only did I have this background with like, oh, I love music and I love to sing and I love to play piano, like all that, or I love to write, it was a constant education in the music industry itself from a business and executive side. So that's kind of how I got into that aspect, because I'm still doing executive work today and have been for a while now.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so my entire life, my parents have owned a record label. It's kind of
that's so cool.
Period on that sentence.
Yeah,
it's been amazing.
It's interesting that they own a hip hop label, and I just got done watching your TED Talk, and your songs are, you know, they're more of like an acoustic-y rock, you know, more of that vibe, I feel like.
Thank you. No, it's crazy, because I always say, my little line is always, I'm an opera singer that's signed to a rap label inspired by a rock band. And that's what Strange Music is, because, you know, the reason it's called Strange Music is because in an early conversation between my father, Travis, and Tech, they were talking about, you know, like, what is your publishing? What's this? Is that exchanging all this information? And one of Tech's things was called EGN Arts. And Dad was like, what's EGN? He said, well, EGN Arts is strange backwards, because if I ever had a record label, I would name it Strange Music after The Doors, after Jim Morrison, after Strange Days. People are strange.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what they did. So I grew up with all these, you know, that's such a telling thing for how diverse the musical influences of this label are, and of my parents and of Tech. Because Tech it's so funny, because you sit next to him on a plane and he headbangs the entire flight. It's hilarious. But you listen, like, he takes off his headphones and you're like, was that Mozart? Like, it's incredible. He will be listening to anything. And my parents are the same way. I grew up listening to Tupac and Eazy and NWA, as well as like the classical channel, because I sang opera, as well as all like Nirvana and all that. Like, there's seriously not a thing I didn't listen to. Johnny Cash and Slim Whitman, like every single genre you could possibly take into consideration is in my upbringing. And so that's something that with Strange Music we have always been open to, because not only are we a rap label, but we're just a music label. And that's kind of what Strange Maine, my division of the label, is about. You know, there's strange music proper, and then there's our, you know, we kind of been calling it the pop division, but I really just call it the not rap division. Strange Maine. And that's kind of an avenue for us to develop artists who are outside the hip hop genre with infrastructure we have as a music label, and delve into those other genres, because ultimately that means we don't have a ceiling. We can just make good art with good artists, you know? So that's kind of where we fall with that. But yeah, a lot of people don't expect me to come out the gate sounding the way I sound because they see strange music, and that doesn't really line up for a lot of people.
Right.
But when you hear the origin story, it makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, now it totally makes sense.
There was this one interview I did where you could tell the editor of the video didn't do his homework on my music when he edited it. And it was a great interview, and I'm not hating. It was just really funny because the bottom said Mackenzie Nicole, rapper / hip hop artist. And I was like, oh no.
Whoops.
He saw strange music and just thought.
Yeah.
But yeah, so silly things like that. But yeah,
That's
no,
funny.
you know, we're just about music at the end of the day.
Sure. So you said you first started singing, or you were singing before you could talk. What was the first instrument you picked up?
The first instrument I picked up was when I started singing opera. My voice teacher required that I play piano so that I could learn how to read music. And I already really naturally kind of understood reading music. It just has always made sense to me because it seems very straightforward, you know? So and it's much more difficult than that. I'm not trying to diminish the work that goes into understanding it, but it's always something that I've been kind of inclined to do. So I took that up, and that's really my only instrument, if I'm being honest. I'm staring in my room at 2 guitars right now that I've tried and failed to learn how to play.
Oh, okay.
And a number of other things, but that was my first and only real instrument that I'm good at and have succeeded in learning. And I'm glad that I know it, because it really, you know, Miss Wendy, my teacher, was right. It really opens the door to everything else. Once you learn how to play piano, it's like learning Latin. You can master anything, you know?
Sure. Yeah. You have a full band with just that one instrument, essentially. I mean, you can do so much with the piano. That's my biggest regret, is I never learned. My dad can play and my sister learned to play, but I just never. I was like, I'm going to learn guitar. And now everybody can play guitar and I can't play piano. So,
hey man, I really I was like every kid who had to take piano. I was pissed about taking piano my entire childhood. I was like, this is the worst. But now I'm like, oh, thank God.
But you're like now you're like every person that learned, and they're like, thank God I learned how to play piano.
Exactly.
That's so funny. So you put out a record in 2018, The Edge. Was that your first release?
That was my first studio album. Yeah.
Okay. So before that, I want to talk to you about like writing your first song and, playing live for the first time. Do you remember those milestones?
So I remember that I've been writing songs for so impossibly long, in my life, because I would say, I'm a writer first more than anything. I love to write, and if I weren't doing this, I'd be writing for a magazine or something.
Okay.
But so I've always just been kind of putting words to music and things like that, just like dorky stuff. I remember probably the first thing I can remember is there were these swings at my grade school, and every time I would swing on them, I would sing the song I made up. And I'm not going to tell you the lyrics because it's dorky, but I had the song I made up about flying through the sky, because that's what it felt like to be on a swing. And I'd from when I was there from first grade to 8th grade, that's always what would play in my head, or what I would sing to myself when I was on there. So I think the first song I can remember writing is about swinging on a swing set. So that's really deep. So that was really, deep and philosophical. And then first time performing live, I know the story. So there's this restaurant. So when I lived in California, when I was little, I lived in Studio City in the Hollywood Hills, and there was this restaurant right next to my house, down the hill from my house, called Mackenzie. And Mackenzie has a piano. And one night when my family was there, they said, any kids want to come up and sing with the pianist? And naturally, because I'm me and little attention whore 4-year-old Mackenzie, was like, I want to go. And so I got up, and about my 5th song in, they said, "Okay, honey, it's time to go back to your table. Come on."
They let you do
And
5
I was like,
songs.
yes, they did. And this song was very important to me. It was called Lil Bunny Foo Foo.
Oh.
And it's very important. You learned it in kindergarten. And I was very dedicated to finishing the song, you see. And he said, and I said, "But I'm not finished." He said, "No worry, you can finish for your parents at the table." I said, "They already know the song." And I insisted that he let me finish Little Bunny Foo Foo, my 5th and final song at my performance at Mackenzie. And that was my first performance that I can remember.
That is awesome. That's a great story.
Every time we pass Mackenzie when we're driving out there, my dad's like, "Oh, we remember that."
He's like, that's so funny. So that was your first performance. You were writing, you started writing your swing set song. And then we come to like, what year, like how old were you around that time? Do you remember?
3 or 4 at the Mackenzie incident.
Wow.
And then I was probably like 5 or 6. Yeah. Cause I was in kindergarten. So I was 4.
Okay.
And I was, cause I moved out there when I was 3, kindergarten, I was 4. And so I was 5 or 6 when we wrote the infamous swing set song.
That's crazy. That's so young. So when did you, when did you start your solo project?
So my, kind of like we tripped and fell into this whole thing because when I was 9 years old, I was singing in the car and Tech was with us because Tech's like my uncle and I don't even remember what we were doing, but he heard me singing and then he went to my parents later on. He's like, "Hey, do you think I can get Mackenzie on a track?" And they're like, "Yes, well, we'll ask her." Of course, me again was like, "I would love to." And so I don't know why my voice turns into a Disney princess when I imitate myself younger. But I was like, "Yes, let's do it." And so I recorded my first ever professionally recorded song, and it was called Demons with Tech 9 and 3-6 Mafia.
Wow.
And
I was
not allowed to listen to the song. Right.
My first song was with Tech 9 and 3-6.
Song until I was older.
Oh, because of the language.
Because of the language, which is impressive because I was always allowed to listen to tech music and stuff. But 3-6 came in with a verse, and my parents were like, "Oh, great, thanks." And so then 9-year-old Mackenzie couldn't listen to her own big fancy big kid song.
Sure.
And so then after that, though, I just continued for the next several years until I was 14 or 15 to feature on Tech's music, on my other label mates' music, like my friend Prozac, who's on Strange. He's amazing. I've gotten to do a lot of work with him. I've worked with just several Strange music artists. And then we had this thing happen in 2015, right? Yeah, 2015, 2016, when our label-wide collabos album, Strange Elation Volume 2, came out. I had Seven, our in-house producer, who's also my mentor and my hero and the reason I'm doing music, called me and he said, "Listen, we can do this thing, for the album where you can feature on a Tech song, you'll make a hook, you'll send it over to him, it'll be his song, or you can make your own song and have Tech feature on it." And I was like, hello. Yeah. I like that. Let's turn those tables. Okay, baby. I'm going. And so I wrote and recorded what would become known as Acting Like You Know, which is my first single. It came out, I think it was 2015. Sorry, I'm bad with years and time.
Oh, it's okay. But still, you're still fairly young when that came out too. Wow.
Yeah, I was 15 and then crazy. I was 15 or 16 when that came out. I was 15 when I recorded it. And I was so mad when I recorded it because every time, I lose my voice. It's a weird anxiety thing, I think. But I lose my voice once, a couple times a year. And it's always if I'm about to record. I think it might be stress-induced. So I go in and I could hardly say a word, but somehow we churned out this song. And
wow.
I have no idea how. We've done that so many times where we were like, how are we going to record this? And then we somehow get me to make noises that sound like words. But it was such a nightmare. And then the song comes out of it. We send it over to Tech and Tech raps his verse. I was at a baseball game for my best friend's birthday, and I get this email. My dad calls me and says, "Hey, go check out your email." I look at it, and it's text and verse on the song. And I listen to it in like the back of Kauffman Stadium, like by the restrooms, where it's like the quietest place I could find. And I was like, holy, like, oh my God, I love it. This is perfect. And so they put that out, and then it ended up being the highest selling single off of this all rap album.
Really?
And then you're like, okay.
Wow.
Yeah. And then my parents were like, oh God, we got to do a music video now. Like, we can't not. Because my parents' thing is like, we never wanted you to do music, but we have to treat you like we treat other artists, because otherwise that's like reverse nepotism.
Sure.
And they and so if another artist had the highest selling single, they would give them a music video. So that's what they did for me. And
so that's kind of how they decided it. Whoever had the highest single on there would get a video.
Yeah. It's like, and that's, and that isn't necessarily like a, do or die rule of thumb type thing, but that was definitely
cool.
That was kind of how they logicked their way out of the logic. I verbed that. How they kind of strategized there.
Sure.
And so then we do this music video, and it ends up doing really well. So then we do another single, and then that leads to us discussing doing an actual project. And then we released The Edge, and The Edge went well. And the thing I really wanted, though, that I didn't get with The Edge was full creative control. And I really wanted to, because like with The Edge, I worked with a co-writer and had a lot of other visions contributing to the making of the project.
Sure.
And really what The Edge was to me was less of my debut album and more of an exercise in seeing if I could go full pop, because I'm not really like, I don't view myself as a classic pop musician. You know what I mean? Like, it's not how I feel, not how I see myself, not how I hear myself. So The Edge was like kind of an experiment for me. Like, okay, like they want to open a pop division. They want to see if I can do pop. Let's see if I can do pop. And it worked. But then after The Edge, I was like, listen, what if we did it my way? And everyone else was kind of like, okay, let's see. What if we did it your way? And then we came up with Complications and Mystic, which are my two most recent releases. Complications was a single just before Mystic.
Then Mystic is the new record, right?
Yes. And that was the first time people really got to hear me as an artist, and hear like what my writing is and what my sound is.
Sure. And
that brings us to present day, and kind of the evolution of like 9-year-old Mackenzie with Tekken 3-6 Mafia to Mackenzie doing a 12 video concept album. So
I want to talk to you about the new album. So I just watched your TED Talk, which is awesome. I love how you I mean, you did a great job. I love how you kind of story tell and then play a track and then tell a little bit more about the record and play a song. And I love how you broke it up. Like, so the album is 3 parts. There's 3 parts to it. And you want to tell, I mean, I saw the video, I know a little bit about it, but you want to tell us about the 3 parts and the concept behind that?
I would love to. So before I go directly into what the 3 parts are, I want to talk about how they came about.
Yes, I would love to hear
that. After I released The Edge, or while I was releasing The Edge, the first 6 months of 2018, I underwent a very, very severe mental breakdown. And this was not sudden. I'd had mental health issues my entire life. As I say in the TED Talk, first thing I say is the first time I remember contemplating suicide, I was 6 years old.
Yeah, I know.
I have been
heavy.
Yeah, it's rough. And like, I laugh about it because how else am I going to cope? But I know it's serious. I don't want to take away from that.
Sure.
But I have always had mental health issues, and they just really came to a head the first 6 months of 2018. And over the course of that period, I nearly killed myself several times. Like, it was a disaster.
Wow.
And I, thankfully, after, I don't want to spoil too much from the TED Talk, but a turn of events, really, in a conversation with my mother, who is my best friend, and like we're super close, caused me to finally go see the psychiatrist that a former friend of mine had begged me to go to. And that was when I got diagnosed with bipolar 1, which was the best news of my entire life. I got put on medication, which is another fantastic, amazing, necessary thing for me. And started going to therapy at least once a week, which I still do to this day. I was just on the phone with my therapist yesterday. Like, a huge, huge, huge jump into recovery. And then come fall of 2018, I had a responsibility to do the second album, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at this time, I felt like all I was that breakdown. I felt like that was my only identity. So I didn't know what else to write about. So that's what I wrote about. And as I was writing this album, I realized I had to tell the full story, right? Because if I just make an album about the darkness, then that's nullifying the existence of what I'm doing now, right? Which is finding the light.
Sure.
And experiencing pieces of the light. So I figured, okay, how do we do this? How do we tell this story in a way that where the light doesn't take away from the darkness and the darkness doesn't take away from the light? Okay, let's tell it like it happened chronologically. And so that's what Mystic is. It's a chronological, odyssey, a documentation of what I went through. So we start in the first chapter, The Rabbit Hole, which is about my absolute rock bottom. And that chapter, man, it's rough. Like, it's the heaviest songs on the album. It is the darkest songs on the album. But I didn't want to stop there because I knew that at the end of the day, when I give a listener a completely dark album, like, yes, the relatability of like, hey, I'm sad too is helpful. Sure. But at the end of the day, like, what else am I offering you? I'm not telling you how I got out of it. And that's what you really need to know.
Right.
And so then let's talk about the next step then. Let's talk about when I chose to try and get better. That's what the second chapter is about. It's called Purgatory. It's this transitional chapter. That's about leaving the darkness and trying to make your way towards whatever the light is. And that's like such an important turning point in my life, Purgatory.
Yeah.
And I name it that because much like The Rabbit Hole is a play off Alice in Wonderland and her fall from grace into complete chaos.
Sure.
So Purgatory, like in a religious sense, expresses like, hey, you're dead, but you're not in heaven and hell yet. And I'm super oversimplifying a very complex religious concept. So I apologize to anyone who just got offended. But like,
I'm following you.
And that's kind of how I felt. Like I'm not in hell anymore. I'm not in heaven. Like I'm somewhere in between. And then finally that leads us to one of the hardest things to write, which was Oxygen, the final chapter of the album. And it was a long time before this chapter of the album actually had a name. For a while, we just called it the Light Chapter because we didn't know what to call it. And the name that came to me as we were nearing the deadline where I had to name it, it kept saying in my head, oxygen, oxygen, oxygen. And I tried to think why. But like the rest of the album, I always say with this album, I didn't create it. It existed somewhere in the universe independent of me. I just happened to be the one who found it and pieced it together. I kept trying to figure out, why is this what came to me? Like, why is this what I'm discovering now? I asked this question a lot creating the album, but this was one of those times where I really questioned it. And I realized, so obvious, because that's what it feels like. It feels like this gasp of fresh air when I've been held underwater for so long. Yeah. And that's what recovery is to me. It's finally getting to breathe after having someone sit on my chest for 12 years of my life. And so then that was hard for me though to write because I'm not really there yet. Like I'm kind of halfway in between Purgatory and Oxygen right now. I'm kind of writing about stuff that the universe revealed to me that I haven't experienced yet when I talk about Oxygen, because it's about being on the other side, right? Whatever that means, air quotes. And I don't really know what that looks like totally. I'm kind of, it's a little bit of guesswork, a little bit of faith when it comes to Oxygen. So that's what the 3 chapters are, and that's what they represent. And really the reason that I wanted to do that again is to tell the full story and not just indulge the darkness, because I think artists have this like almost masturbatory impulse to just like talk about the darkness and talk about the darkness because the darkness is so like seductive. But like, as I owe the listener more than that, I owe myself and my story more than that, because to just tell one part of it isn't to do everything I went through justice, Yeah,
I love that. Yeah, I was going to ask you what the hardest part to write was, but you kind of said it with Oxygen. You said that was the most difficult piece of the record.
Because like it's weird because there are so many different varieties of hard with this album, with as like deep and difficult as it was, and like the entire album is kind of just me talking about wanting to kill myself and then not doing it. So like, that's rough.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the hardest section overall, like the hardest thing to kind of conceptualize, it was Oxygen, because like I said, I'm not there yet. I'm doing a lot of work towards getting there, but really this album, I learned more about what I was talking about in Oxygen every day. Cause like I said, I just did what the universe told me to do, sometimes not knowing what it was or why I was doing it.
Sure.
And so that was hard. There were a lot of songs where I just cried and cried in the booth making them. There was a lot of crying. I cry a lot.
Oh, wow.
But like Happy was one of those songs, like Happy and A Cut Rose and Tap Water.
That's a great song,
Happy,
Cut Rose and Tap Water.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Like with Happy, it was one of those ones where I had this, it was so stupid of me. So I had this big meeting, right? This one day I had people in town. I had this big, super important meeting, and I had a studio day the same day. So I was going to leave the studio, go to this meeting after they were done getting the tour of the Strange Music Complex, which is like 6 or 7 buildings out in Lee Summit, Missouri. And it's a whole different tangent. But I go in and I'm like, okay, what song am I recording today? And I look and I was like, oh, Happy. Damn it. Because I was just in the booth, like before I had this big meeting, I'm sobbing, all my makeup's coming off as I'm like trying to record. And like I have this big meeting and people are coming to the studio and I'm like hiding behind the mic. I'm like, hi, have a great day. And like, it was so dumb. So that was one that I was really emotional during, because that was a really raw topic for me. It's about a breakup. And then A Cut Rose and Tap Water was one of the hardest recording days, period, because I had been feeling really good for a long time, right? I've been feeling good for months. My medication was working, therapy was working, everything was great. Not without challenges, but pretty great. And I went in this one day, and it was during a week where I just like suddenly felt like I had taken 10 steps back. Like my medicines were starting to screw up, like and not work as well as they had. So I had to adjust them.
Sure.
And, it was really, really rough. I was feeling really depressed, like truly depressed for the first time since I had went into recovery and gotten medicated. It was just really ugly. And I went in with the intention to do this song with a rapper friend of mine that was like a super turned up, like crazy track. And it was very party, very dance. And then I tried to record it like 4 different times. And then I was like, you know what, give me a minute. And I went out to my car and I found this beat that Seven, my producer, had sent me. And I had originally listened to it and deemed it too dark to use. It didn't really feel space for it on the album. And I pulled it up and I played it and I knew immediately what I had to do. And so I wrote A Cut Rose and Tap Water about exactly how I was feeling, which was, like, I felt so good for so long, and yet here I am, like I've circled back to feeling horrible. Like maybe this is just how I'm supposed to feel. Like maybe I don't believe in fate, but maybe it exists, and maybe mine is to just be miserable. Because look at me, I was fine, and now I'm miserable again. Like, and so that's what A Cut Rose and Tap Water was. And I still remember that day with a heavy heart because it was just so ugly for me. And then I'd say the hardest song, just technically speaking, like in terms of actual difficulty, not emotionally, but just literally recording it, was because I re-recorded that song like 6 times and I still hated it. And I was like, Jesus. Like, but it was, like I said, like there was a reason the universe told me to do it. You know what I mean? Like there was a reason I felt compelled to write what I wrote and sing what I sang. And so I couldn't not put it on the album just because I wasn't comfortable with it. That's selfish and stupid. So I ended up putting it on the album anyway. And of course, it's the one that I get the most people saying like they like. It's the funniest thing to me. Of course, that's what it would be.
Yeah.
But those were the like most difficult parts of the album. Sorry, I gave you 8 answers to 1 question.
I appreciate the 8 answers, to be honest. I love it. So the new record, or this album, Mystic, is it going to be a short film? Are you?
Yes, we are doing something with it. So when I was coming up with Mystic, again, I'm always going to go into backstory before I tell you what's happening because I always want to tell you too much and be too wordy. I kept having this thing come to me as I was writing these songs where like I'd be driving and all of a sudden another like dot would connect itself, or I'd be in the shower and all of a sudden I'd have this epiphany as to what something on the album meant. Well, Mystic kind of came together in pieces, right? There's a drawing dated from like January, February 2017 of the Mystic cover, which is about 2 years. yeah, it's 2 years before I even, like, it's a year before the content would even come out, or, you know, it's like 2017 or 2018. So it's either like a year or two before the album, like, content really came together. It's, you know, 2 or 3 years before its release. Like, but it was just because one day I was sitting in a meeting and I had an idea. It wouldn't be cool to have a psychic themed album. Like,
Yeah.
so I drew this drawing of an album cover and I gave it to a coworker of mine. He had it on his desk for years. And then eventually I posted a picture of it on my Instagram. I was like, hey guys, like, this is what Mystic was a couple years ago before it ever got released.
Oh, wow.
And
I'll have to look that up.
And that was the first piece. It didn't even have a title at that point. It wasn't even called Mystic. I just put Untitled on the top and then drew a psychic with all these different like items on her desk, and they're all exactly what's on the cover today.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so that was the first piece that came to me. And then as I was like looking around my room one day, I saw that I had this note on my notepad over on my desk. It says Mystic Coffee, psychic themed coffee shop. And I was like, Mystic, that's a kind of cool name. I like that. And then I was like, maybe I could Mystic Psychic album cover. Okay, maybe I'll use that.
Nice.
And then as I was creating the album, I was like, you know, it'd be cool because I have a bunch of album cover and album concept ideas in my head. You know, none of those really fit. What if I use that psychic idea I had? And then just the pieces kept coming together. And I was like, like all this like is meaning something. But like, what is this other thing I'm feeling? And I kept feeling this nagging sensation of I wasn't the only person this album was about, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
and all
totally.
of a sudden, it was revealed to me that I wasn't. There was an entirely different person that this album was about, and that was the girl. Mm-hmm. And the girl, as I call her, is not me at all. We don't even know each other than the work we've done here together for these films. We are in no way similar. We just went through the same thing. We both went through a mental breakdown in our own unique ways. Mm-hmm. She has her own horrible relationship and her own, you know, she has substance abuse problems and she has impulse control problems and she's suicidal and she feels all these things. Are some of our feelings common? Yes, we do feel some of the same things. We just feel them differently. And I realized that not only was she important, but what she would do was important. And here's what she would do is some people were going to access the album through me, but there are going to be people who can't relate to me, maybe don't even like me, but like the album or feel like they want to listen or try the album. And I wanted to give them an avenue to access this content and the album itself that wasn't me. So that's why we have this girl character who you see in the 12 visuals that come together to make the short film. Mm-hmm. That is who the brown-haired girl you see on my socials is, because she's a different person. And maybe you can relate to her if you can't relate to me. Mm-hmm. And so all this to say, I tried to think of how I could tell both of our stories within the album itself. And I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place. I'm sorry.
No, this is perfect. Thank you so much for sharing.
Of course. Yeah. I was trying to think, like, how can I do both of our stories justice? Because these songs really focus more on me. And yes, they apply to her, but the specifics are about me. And I realized, wait, what if we didn't tell her story here? This relates to her, yes, and this does explain her. But what if we really told her story through some visuals? And I was like, okay, how do we incorporate her and this cover though? Like, what do they mean? Because the cover is the psychic, and what does she mean to her story? And I would be like, I remember one day I was just driving on the interstate and the entire puzzle put itself together for me. And I can't say because the 12th video comes out at the time of this recording, has not come out yet. But I apologize for just dating this recording. I'm sorry.
It's fine. It's totally fine. It's going to happen.
But like the piece of the puzzle, the final one clicked into place. And I realized, oh my God, I know what her story is. And I know exactly how to tell it in the visuals. Okay. So then there came this question of, okay, now we figured out the girl. We figured out the psychic. We figured out all these things. Or I call her the psychic. The mystic is the proper term considering the name of the album.
The record,
the entire album is called Mystic. So I should probably use that term. So we have the girl, we have the mystic, we have their story. Let's figure out how to tell that in a visual. And I was like, okay, well, which song do I pick? And which song how do I convey her entire problem, her drinking problem, her pill popping issue, her abusive boyfriend, her like suicidal ideation? How do I tell these things and incorporate this entire other character and her part in her story in one visual? It's not possible. And I tried every single way I could, except for like I kept having to compromise, and this was too important to compromise. So I went to my dad and I was like, listen, I have an idea. So here's the story I'm trying to tell, and here's this part of it, and here's this part of it, and here's the big ending, and this is what it means. And I don't know how to tell that in one visual. Do you think we could do a few visuals? And he was like, okay, let's see, like maybe 3 or 4. And I was like, I would do 3, 1 for each part of the album. And so then it was like, okay, how do I pick the proper songs? Because all the songs like are about something else. That's how songs work. Like, there's the second song in each chapter is a relationship song, like, and Fun, which is the 4th song in the first chapter, is going to talk about something completely different than, the 3rd song in the first chapter is going to talk about something completely different from the 4th song in the chapter, Cut Rose and Tap Water.
Sure.
And how are we going to relate that to the House Above the World? Like, I was like, God, like, how are we going to do 3? And we met with people, and we had, all these conference calls and meetings on how to figure this out. And finally, I said, one of us said, me or my dad said, what if we did a video for each song?
Oh, yeah.
And I remember, and so that went over well. I'm pretty sure it was me who said it, and then his face melted into a puddle on the floor, and then his heart like jumped out of his chest, and he wanted to die because he saw the dollar sign next to that. And so like he said though, like, let's maybe, like, I'll consider, like, if you think you can pull it off, but you better pull it off. I pretty much had a gun to my head on, you better pull this off, because like, otherwise you're wasting a lot of people's time and a lot of people's money and a lot of people's resources. Jesus, I'm giving myself anxiety thinking about that conversation. It's been a month and it's been a year. And so then again, more meetings, more conference calls. And I remember I was on this one call in particular where this very established I do music videos person was talking to me. And I won't say their name, obviously, or what they do, but they do music videos. And I said, I'm thinking about all this, but I really want to and have to do a video for each song. And they said to me, every artist I've ever worked with has tried to do a song or a video for every song on the album. And I'll tell you now, it's not going to work. Oh. And I sit here now and I go, thank you. Because not only did I do it, not only did we do it, but we did it really well. And now we have 12 videos that come together to make a short film that tells the entire story. And we've been releasing a video every Friday since January 17th. And the final video release is coming up, and then it'll all be released in one huge short film, which is just the combination of all 12 videos. And so you can watch them as one constant piece instead of having to, look for 12 separate parts.
Sure.
And like, it's just incredible, man. Like, I'm so proud of this. Like,
that's so cool.
It's crazy because it really is like a concept album taken to like the next level, because like there's this thing people do where they're like, I did a concept album, all the songs have a meaning and it's kind of similar, like, and it's like not a concept album to me. And I'm not trying to be a snob. Like, I have a very specific definition of a very literal definition of a concept album, and that definition doesn't stretch much. Right. And we really did a concept album.
True concept album.
And so, and like, I think that honestly, we really pulled off what we went for well. And I know that's not what the question was, but this is just me kind of talking myself up a little bit and talking my team up a little bit, because there was so much, like, I cannot explain the amount of work that went in on so many fronts from so many amazing people here at Strange and associated with us to make this possible. Like, the idea of me doing this by myself is so laughable because I had so many great people on this team. Like, we have an amazing video department here at Strange that killed it. My director, Taylor, who I've known, it's funny, actually, everything fell into place the way it was supposed to with this entire album. Like, we looked forever for a director. We're like, we got to find the perfect director. And then we ended up, on a phone call, myself and the head of our video department, a kid named Taylor Lamb. I'm not a kid. He's a grown man now, but I've known him since he was 18. I've known him like over half my life, if not, I've known him for a long time is the point. And he called me. He's like, I know we're looking for a director, but he's going to be mad at me for this impression. But, I could always direct it. We can't find you one. Just putting that out there. You don't have to, but And I was like, okay, sure. And I thought about it, and I was like,
throwing his hat in the ring there.
Yeah, and I was like, that's very generous to him because that's a huge task to take on, and a lot of people could probably look at that as like, okay, you gave yourself the job. Like, no, he just gave himself like the worst responsibility ever. 12 music videos, like to write and direct 12 music videos alongside a control freak artist who's also your boss's daughter. Like, who would do that? But I thought about it, and like he has his own really like personal connection to the content that was really relevant to him at the time. And I've known him my entire life practically, and we're really close. We're good friends. Like, who else should direct this? How am I going to bring a stranger in when I have this amazing, talented family member at Strange who's not who has no reason not to? So that worked out perfectly. And things like that, where I had so many amazing team members. I have my parents who were incredibly supportive, even though listening to your child talk about wanting to kill herself for months and months and years on end is probably horrible. And my publicist, everyone came together and was a real team on this. So an answer to how do the visuals work? That's a huge rant.
That is so cool. Well, I'm excited to see the final video. Congratulations. That's a huge accomplishment.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I have one more question for you. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. We really, really appreciate it.
No, thank you. Because honestly, it's what am I going to do without people who care? You know what I mean? Because if you guys didn't care enough to take some time out of your day and listen to me chat your ear off, then me doing music is just me playing to an empty room. You know what I mean? So I really have you guys to thank. But anyway, sorry, what's your question?
Thank you so much. Do you have any advice for aspiring artists?
Yes. So I get this question a lot, and I'm not going to tell you to write what you know and things like that. Those are great pieces of advice, or just be yourself. That's all great, but you have plenty of people telling you that. What I'm here to tell you is to learn about the business. I cannot emphasize that enough. If you are an artist, and you're young, if you're an artist and you're young and you're a female, especially if you got the trifecta like I do, people in these meetings are going to talk at you, talk through you, talk over you, but they won't talk to you because they think you're stupid and they think you don't know what's going on. And moreover, they think you don't care what's going on as long as you get to play your little instrument and sing your little songs. And you need to make sure they're wrong. You need to make sure you always know more than the people around you think you know. Learn the business, learn how to be an executive, learn how to think like an executive. And so you can be the master of your own destiny as an artist and not be subject to the whims of people who understand it just a little bit better than you and can manipulate the system just a little bit more than you. That's my biggest piece of advice to artists is if you're trying to be in the music industry, okay, study up. Because if you want to just because it's a business. You're in the music business and you can't just do that without knowing what you're doing because you're going to get chewed up and spit out by people who do know what they're doing, for better or for worse. So that's my advice.